How are you? And greetings from rural Ohio. I have no idea where I am right now, but this is a lot of fun that I get to be in satsang and be by myself at the same time. I'm leaving Cleveland, and I just left our In My Mission Cleveland fundraiser. Many of you know that we've purchased an ashram, and now we are having a fundraiser for the renovation. So what we did in our fundraiser was invite the prominent dance schools from Cleveland, the dance schools in Cleveland. So right now I got to see around 50 students who were engaged in Kuchipudi and Odissi and Bharatanatyam and Kathak. And as each of the teachers was speaking about what their students were to do, and the fact that I got to see these 50 students engage in this ancient and applicable Indian dance art shows that these teachers are doing the same for their students, for the next generation. And I'm using this as a reference because this is the vision of our mentorship sangha also. To create this succession plan where one who knows a little bit more about life is sharing that with someone who wants to know a little bit more about life. So what all of you are doing as mentees, as mentors, as our team, is very much aligned with Bharatiya culture. And as I was watching these students, it made me more appreciative of the satsang, of the workshop that we're having right now. Now that's all I have to share, but the subject matter that our workshop is on today is on sattva. So it's actually something I know a little bit about. In most workshops, I have no idea what the sharers are talking about. So I learn a lot, but I know a little bit about sattva. And so do you. So I'm just going to tell you about my personal experience. In my backpack here, I have my blue, this is my pink notebook, but I also have a blue notebook. My blue notebook is for my special discourses, workshops, and so on. And so in the blue notebook, and nobody saw this other than me, and if my hands were more free, I would show you. I wrote two numbers. I wrote 175K COM, and then I wrote 250K COM. So what this means is, at the commencement of our fundraiser, we should have raised $175,000. At the commencement of our fundraiser, we had raised $180,000. And at the completion of our fundraiser, that we should have raised $250,000. When I left the school that we were renting, we were at $251,000. That's what sattva is. The word sattva means sattva, which means like the truth. When our thoughts, our words are aligned with the truth, they're like the truth, then our actions will manifest that. And I'm sharing this personally because so many of us study so much about sattva, but we tend to make this theoretical. And I'm sharing my personal experience that what I wrote in this book came to fruition because in Cleveland, our slogan amongst all of those who serve is, Bhagwan is doing Bhagwan's work. That I am just a sevaka, you're just a sevika. This is what sattva is, and it's so important and effective to nurture. And that's what we're going to learn about in this workshop that we're about to experience, about the metaphysical and the physical. I I offer my appreciation to all of you for being patient, first of all, for this very annoying context to you, but it's a lot of fun. I'm not saying you should do it, but it's a lot of fun, and I'll get to continue to learn from all of you and our team and our sharer too, who's actually part of our team. With that, thank you. Team, please continue.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vivekji. On the go, but always, spreading the word no matter where Vivekji is. So we're grateful for that. I'm actually going to hand it over to our speaker, Rachana. We're very excited to have Rachana join us. She's going to be speaking on the topic Sattva and Serotonin. What's the connection? So excited to see how living a sattvic lifestyle can really help us integrate our mind, body, and spirit. So with that, Rachana, I would love for you to do an introduction and take it away.
Really just wanted to offer my gratitude to Vivekji, my gratitude to the community, and mostly gratitude to Bhagwan. I'm really grateful for the chance to speak about this. And as I share anything at all today, I will just start off with, in preparing for this talk, I'm a pediatrician by profession. I've been practicing as a pediatrician for about 20 years now. I'm board certified in obesity medicine and completed the obesity medicine certification about 3 or 4 years back now. I've been a student of Vivekji, a student of Chinmay Mission, a student of Vedanta for about 12 years. And with all of those different things, really, I'm just sharing with you some of my thoughts based on what I've learned and what I've understood of it. So it's not meant to be a medical CME, nor is it meant to be a lecture by a trained guide. It is just my thoughts. And so I hope that you all enjoy hearing about it. I made my boys listen to me. One of them went to sleep. The other one said that he already knew all this stuff. So we'll see what you all think about it. I'm looking forward to just hearing your thoughts as we go. So with that in mind, really just wanted to get started with this conversation about serotonin and sattva, and some of the intentions for this evening. Again, I mean, not really to provide any sort of medical treatment whatsoever, but to share information about health and well-being. When I did my pediatric residency, we didn't talk about health and well-being as much as we talked about disease and treating disease. And thankfully, I feel like there's been a huge shift in medicine. And so with that in mind, just wanted to share some information that's out there, but also as a seeker, really not to limit ourselves with using these things as relaxation techniques, and really kind of keeping our goal as seekers in mind in everything that we're talking about today. So kind of that bigger goal of feeling independent joy, that bigger goal of being happiness, and that really none of the things that we're talking about are just at that kind of basic level of relaxation techniques, because a lot of times that's how some of these things are brought out. And I will also share some of these things in that way. So World Health Organization, when they talk about health, really it's talked about in the state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. Again, very different from, I think, when I did my training, where it was really kind of focusing on disease and how do you treat the disease. And why is that relevant for all of us as seekers? The two things that I kind of took away from that I was going to share, and I know this is a really wordy slide. I'm not expecting you all to read all the words on it, but we recently learned a Shanti mantra, in which I think the primary understanding that I took away from this, it's a Shanti mantra from Samaveda, Chandogya Upanishad, that sort of teaches really you have to have a strong physical and mental well-being to be able to get past the mind and body and to be able to really feel that oneness. And so to be able to get past the mind and body, if we're strong with our mental well-being, if we're strong with our physical well-being, then that's an opportunity for us to go beyond that. And similarly, in Bhagavad Gita, I think there's a lot of conversation around so much of this thing that takes place between Bhagwan and Prince Arjuna. But I think one of the things was just about really, I mean, even at that level of sattva, still we want to kind of remember that we're trying to go beyond that. And so to keep those things in our mind as we're talking about some of those other things, I thought might be useful to do. And so a healthy, balanced body and a healthy mind is not the ultimate goal. It's just a tool that makes the journey a little bit smoother. And so, you know, our talk today is about sattva and serotonin. So I'm super curious and would love to see, if you don't mind putting in the chat what comes to your mind when you think of the word serotonin. And if there's anything that does come in your mind, I would love to just see what you're thinking about. Calmness, happy neurotransmitter happiness. So I think a lot of people are sort of in that same mode when they think about feel good, right? So I think that's commonly a thing that people associate serotonin with. And so I might share some other thoughts about it along with this happy feel good thought. What comes to your mind when you think of sattva? Purity, peace, lasting happiness, calmness, goodness. Very nice. So I put very specific things that came to my mind when I think of sattva. I don't know if these things will resonate with you or not. One of the things that came to my mind when I thought about sattva was a plant-based diet, kind of, I guess, the idea of ahimsa and not doing the least amount of harm, that type of a thing, non-processed diet. That was something that came to my mind. Japa and puja and dhyana was something else that came to my mind when I thought about sattva. And then at the start of the pandemic, one of the things that I thought was just really, really helpful from our Vichara Gurukula community was the High Five Challenge that the team had put forward and that Vivekji had put forward with regards to sleeping early, waking early, studying early, and walking early, sinking early. And so those were some of the things that I thought about when I was thinking about the term sattva. And so I said I would share my thoughts with that. And then I will talk to you a little bit about serotonin beyond just being sort of this happy, calm feeling that we get. So serotonin is a neurotransmitter. It's actually thought to be many things. And since our conversation is going to be a little bit shorter, I will maybe just highlight a few things about it. But serotonin is a neurotransmitter that is made by our brain and also by our gut microbiome, and can really affect a lot of our body. And the more that we're learning about serotonin, the more that we're realizing how much it can affect our body, whether that be with regards to our mind and our thoughts, or our mood and our affect, like how many people referenced it, whether it be with regards to our sleep-wake cycle and our ability to focus, with our bones, with our gut, with our intestines, and even things like wound healing and with our platelets. And, you know, again, there's so many different things, and it's really not a linear conversation. There's many neurotransmitters, many chemicals in our body that work together and work in a way that it's not that you're looking for too much or too little, but how they work together with each other. So I put just a little cartoon here to give some idea of what is a neurotransmitter. A neurotransmitter means, like, if you take one of these nerve cells, and at the very end of the nerve cell, you may have all of these little chemicals that are trying to come out and talk to the next cell, whether it be another nerve cell or whether it be a muscle or another organ. But these little chemicals, as they're coming out, they're just relaying messages back and forth. And that's one way that we'll see serotonin in our brain. But there's a lot of conversation that actually happens directly and indirectly between our brain and our gut, and a lot of serotonin that gets produced in our gut. So I've been kind of mentioning multiple times now about this gut microbiome, because a majority of the serotonin is actually produced in the gut rather than being produced in the brain. And while serotonin can affect many parts of our body, I did want to spend just a little bit of time talking about this gut microbiome and sharing a little bit of information about it. So I'm curious, when you think about the gut microbiome, if there's things that come into your mind, or microbiome in general, are there things that come into your mind when you think or hear the word microbiome? And if there are things that come into your mind, if you want to share them in the chat, good bacteria, gut wall barrier protection, probiotics. If you had to guess with this microbiome, like what's in it? What makes it up? Yes, the third brain, I love it. So what makes up this microbiome? Or is it something, you know, if you had to put a number to it, like how big do you think it might be? So, and again, I think a lot of times, like when we talked, when I was in residency, when we thought about microorganisms, it was always kind of a harmful or a negative. But we don't actually probably even know for sure, but we think there's probably trillions of microorganisms, whether they be bacteria, viruses, fungi, and even other organisms. They probably have more genetic material in our body than we do in our body. So it really is just this ginormous, you know, I mean, whether you call it a third brain, whether you call it its own organ system, whether you say it's 6 pounds or 7 pounds. I mean, I think we don't actually know enough to be able to identify everything about it, but it is an incredible system that is happening within our body, and actually for the most part is really quite beneficial. And believe it or not, just like with everything else, the more diverse it is, the more beneficial it is. The less diverse it is, you know, the more harmful it is for our body. And that diversity can actually really be connected to many, many parts of our body. So oftentimes we may talk about heart health, or we may talk about, you know, in terms of our neurologic system or our psychiatric system separately. But really, when we think about this microbiome and thinking of having a healthy microbiome, we're really able to impact our whole body, and how our mental state of being can really impact how our microbiome is. The whole thing is just connected in such an amazing way. And it's fascinating to me, because this is all something that really is not necessarily what we think of as me or my body, but it's such a huge part of my body. And so that's some information with regards to the gut microbiome. So how do we tie some of these things together? What are things that we think about? Why am I, you know, why is all of this relevant? So as a pediatrician, you know, definitely we think about it really from early on, and it's probably even before the baby is born that the gut microbiome is starting to get affected. It is very different across all ages. So if you looked at a baby's gut microbiome versus a 30-year-old versus a 70-year-old, it would be very different, and certainly is different across the world. But there were kind of two little pieces of this pie that I was hoping to just spend a little bit more time talking about. So one is with regards to the diet, and then the other one is with regards to lifestyle. So stress, exercise, the psychological component of things, because those are, I think, two factors that maybe we may be able to control a little bit more. We would love to not use so many antibiotics and medications, but sometimes you have to use it. We really, you know, probably can't control so much in terms of where we live or where we stay. But the diet and the lifestyle, I think, are two that we have a little bit more control over. So I was hoping to just share a couple of thoughts with that. And so with regards to the diet specifically, I just wanted to share a really small study, small in terms of, I'm sorry, I think I went too far ahead. Okay. I wanted to share just one example of a study that I think brings home this point pretty well. So there was a study that compared children in Africa versus children in Italy. And these children in Africa had a very sort of just based on their location, it was more of a rural area. So they culturally breastfed till the baby was 2 years old. And generally the culture was that they really would eat kind of a plant-based protein, high fiber diet, lots of fruits, lots of vegetables. And really just because of where they were, there was not a lot of processed food available to them, versus kind of this wealthier Italian community that had really primarily animal-based protein, primarily high fat, high sugar, low fiber, and ultra processed food in the diet. The calorie count itself was different, and that may have just been the nature of this rural area versus this kind of city in Italy. But what they found between these two groups of children was that the children in Africa really had a lot more diversity in their gut microbiome, and the greater the diversity, the better for the system, versus these children that were living in Italy had a much less diverse microbiome. And as a result, they actually had more of the harmful bacteria and less of the helpful bacteria growing in the gut, leading to a lot more inflammation of the gut. And so these children that lived in Africa, and the diet seemed to be a big component of it based on the age and everything else going on with them. They seemed to have a much higher level of the small chain fatty acid producing bacteria, which is seeming to have a very protective role in the gut inflammation. So this is one example of where the diet can make a difference. And so when you think about what we know or understand about a diverse gut microbiome, I wanted to just kind of tie that to what I think of as a sattvic diet, just based on what I've learned and understood. I'm not an Ayurvedic practitioner at all, so I'm just going based off of my understanding of it, that the foods that really we can tell have an increased gut microbiome diversity are foods that are plant-based, foods that are locally grown and fresh, foods that are not ultra processed, and foods that are high in fiber. So if there was a take home in terms of diet, I feel like those kind of 5 things would be maybe some of the take home. The other thing that sort of from the studies with obesity medicine that have come up is really there is some circadian rhythm to the microbiome, meaning that a lot of the bacteria is awake during the daylight hours and it's asleep during the dark. And so if you were to eat the exact same food during the day versus that exact same food in the night, there's much more benefit that comes from that food during the day and much more harm that comes from it at nighttime. So it's fascinating the way the microbiome works, and it really does work based on what else is happening, just as we do. But those were 2 sort of take home that I thought were really interesting with regards to diet specifically. So then I just wanted to share a little bit about the effects of stress and the gut microbiome. We know that chronic stress can lead to a less diverse microbiome. And there's this nerve that kind of communicates back and forth between the gut and the brain that really, if the mood is impacted, it can impact how the gut acts. If the gut is impacted, it can impact the mood. And there's a lot of conversation that takes place back and forth between the two. And so whether it be because of the neurotransmitters like the serotonin that we spoke about earlier, or dopamine, whether it be because of our stress response with regards to the fight or flight, when things are not okay, that impacts the gut. When the gut is not okay, that impacts the brain through this vagus nerve. And so there's a lot of conversation that happens back and forth between the two. And why that may be relevant, or what's there to talk about. So I mentioned earlier about this relaxation and our not limiting ourselves to thinking that what we're learning as seekers is just a relaxation response, because there's actually some really fascinating studies that have been done. This physician has actually since passed away, but Dr. Benson at the Mind Body Institute at Harvard looked at these relaxation responses, and he looked at some very specific relaxation responses, and that's what he's calling it. I hate to call it that, but I'm using his words in this. He looked at the repetition of a sound. He looked at the repetition of a word, the repetition of a phrase, repetition of a prayer, or looked at movement. And so much of that to me just made me think of puja and japa and dhyana. And he looked at all of these things with regards to a number of meditative techniques, repetitive prayers, Tai Chi, yoga, progressive muscle relaxation, belly breathing. These are all things that we actually use in the office frequently. Now, these things are in some studies known as the Benson relaxation response. To his credit, he did talk about that a lot of this came from Tibetan monks that he learned some of these things from in northern India, but really the credit, I think that's as far as it went. In the studies, you can see that they talk a lot about the Benson relaxation response, but even in the last few years, like they've used this technique in the emergency room and find reduction in anxiety and depression symptoms. They find that it reduces your oxygen consumption, it reduces your heart rate, your blood pressure. So there's a lot of value in this physically for the body, but just really is not, I mean, that we shouldn't be limited in why we use it. But at the same time, I just wanted to share that there is a lot of value in this specifically for the body, and where sattva really keeps your body healthy so that you can go beyond this. And so our high five challenge, I just wanted to share a few thoughts about our high five challenge before I wrap up. I know I'm just about out of time here, but our start of the pandemic, the team had come up with this beautiful high five challenge, and Vivekji had come up with this beautiful high five challenge of sleep early, wake early, study early. And so I just wanted to share some of the benefits of that. So in the morning, when you greet the morning sunlight, when you see that first thing in the morning, it actually makes your retina produce serotonin, and that serotonin can help you with being more focused and being more alert throughout the day. That serotonin over the course of the day gets converted to melatonin. So in the night, it actually helps us sleep more soundly. It helps us sleep better. And so greeting the morning sunlight, waking up early, studying early because we're more focused in the morning helps us sleep early. So it's all tied together. Similarly with the walk early and sink early. So when we exercise, the exercise increases our serotonin levels, our dopamine and norepi levels. These are some other neurotransmitters that it can help with. And in the process, it really changes our brain's response in terms of bringing short-term joy and short-term happiness, feeling more love, feeling more hope. So that really helps us sink early. So I felt like all 5 of those were just so neatly tied together between the sunlight and exercise. So between the sunlight, the exercise, the diet with regards to the high fiber foods, with regards to the less processed foods, fresh food, plant-based food. Some of these things I hope were useful. I hope were helpful to think about. So what I wanted you to do is just close your eyes for a couple of minutes if you're comfortable to, or leave them open, whatever is more comfortable for you. But just over the next couple of minutes, think about a few things which you feel like with regards to these sattvic lifestyle issues, you are doing really well and you feel really good about. And why do you feel good about it? I mean, what is it that you're doing well? What do you feel like? I'm so glad I'm doing these things, and I'd like to keep doing them. And as you're thinking about those things, also maybe just bring to your mind one aspect of your life with regards to the sattvic lifestyle, which you feel like, you know what, I'd like to change that. And this is why I would like to change that. So really ask yourself, what is it about that makes you want to change that? So one aspect of your life which you'd like to change and why you would like to change it. So once you have some of those things in your mind, if you wanted to maybe open your eyes and just make some notes for yourself as to what they were, why they were, just write down some of the things that you feel really good about and write down one thing that you feel like if you could change, this is what you would like to change. Okay, and then what we're going to do next, we're going to open up the breakout rooms in just a few minutes. When we open up the breakout rooms, I'm going to actually share this on a separate slide. So we're going to try to set this up as a very specific SMART goal. A SMART goal means that you try to be as specific as you can, try to make it as measurable and achievable and realistic. So and time bound. And I can give you as an example, I love eating ice cream at night. And I set for myself a very specific goal of trying to not eat ice cream 5 days a night, but 5 days a week, but maybe cutting it back to 2 days a week. And that's something that I feel like I could measure just based on how frequently I eat it. I think it's achievable because I really don't need to eat that much ice cream, but just really like it. And I would like to do that for the summer. So something like that, if you wanted to set up for yourself. So when we open up the breakout rooms, talk to the people in your group about what you feel good about and what you're proud of, because that is something that may be inspirational for others. And it's nice to really also just give yourself a pat on the back for what you feel like you're doing well. And then, share with them, because that makes you accountable for each other and makes you feel accountable for your goal. If there's something, and I would really try to keep it something small. Don't try to make it something too much, because it becomes hard to meet then. So hopefully this has been a useful exercise. We'll go ahead and open the breakout rooms if you want to join them.
Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaah, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Hariom, everyone. Have a lovely evening.